On today's episode, we'll be looking at Terranigma, an action RPG developed for the Super Nintendo and released in Japan in October of 1995. It was localized in English the following year, but only released in Europe, so we missed out on it here in the States. However, thanks to Netro, who donated a copy to me to play, I finally had a chance to dive into this charming and addictively fun experience. Here's what I found after the first 3 hours. Terranigma was developed by Quintet, the same studio that brought us ActRaiser, Soul Blazer, and Illusion of Gaia. I actually didn't know this before sitting down to make the video, but a number of key personnel in executive positions within this company are actually veterans of the East series, and after playing Terranigma, I can totally see that influence. Tomoyoshi Miyazaki, the scenario writer for East 1, 2, and 3, is the director and president of Quintet, and Masaya Hashimoto, the main director, programmer, and designer of those East games, is also a producer for the company. I certainly didn't make that kind of connection immediately, but thinking about it now, I can definitely see how Terranigma is a similar, though evolved experience to that of Classic East. When I say that, what I mean is that while the game is simple, it's also remarkably fun in an intangible kind of way. For me, it's almost therapeutic or cathartic to play. It's a game that offers no stress and is also absolutely satisfying. It's hard to describe, as I'm sure some people would argue that a game that sits on the easier side usually wouldn't be considered satisfying, especially among a growing elitist hardcore community, but this game does it for me. The controls are really tight and everything feels nice and smooth. In classic fashion for top-down RPGs of this era, your character has a walking and running animation depending on if you hold down the B button while moving. This game also includes a jump button, which gives lots of variation to the kinds of attacks you can do. For instance, standing still and attacking in succession will give you these fast jabs, whereas standing still or walking, then jumping and attacking will give you this front flip slice. Running while attacking will result in this sort of diving stab, and attacking after a running jump offers a similar effect but while descending upon your enemies. All in all, it's pretty simple, but each move is easily executed and they all have their own benefit or disadvantage depending on your environment and the enemies you're facing. One thing I really like is how level progression has an immediate, considerable effect on the character's strength. Even just one level up can make a pretty big difference, and I really like it when games are designed that way. It makes it so that even if you're doing low damage when you first enter a new area, if you stick it out and persevere, you'll soon be able to level up and handle yourself more easily. I imagine this will do a lot to discourage backtracking for level grinding purposes and keep the game moving forward at a good pace. I also like how menus are presented in this game. Rather than pressing a button to enter a menu screen like most games, Terranigma sends the character into different rooms that can be navigated. So if you're looking to change equipment, you actually walk into the equipment room, approach the piece of equipment you want, and select it. Fable 3 actually did something really similar to this, as a frame of reference for those of you who have played it, and I think it's a pretty clever way of handling menus. There are definitely those out there who will think that this is just a more tedious way of going about it, but I actually enjoy it a lot. I love the animation where Ark jumps into the box to enter the menu as well. There's a story explanation for this, by the way, so it's not really as weird as it might seem without context, but this little animation right here is a perfect example of the kind of charm this game displays. The visuals as a whole are properly polished, which isn't necessarily a surprise seeing as this came so late in the SNES's life cycle, but the pixel art and animation are top-notch nonetheless. The character and enemy designs are all excellent, and the developers use Mode 7 for some interesting effects on the world map, which I'll get into more in just a bit. The music is also effective in complementing the aesthetic. It's not necessarily up there with the greats, at least from what I've heard so far, but there are a couple of tracks that really stood out to me, and I found myself humming the tunes the day after I had played. Ellie's theme in particular struck a chord with me. It's seriously a really great song, so go listen to it if you haven't heard it before. I also feel that Darkside Field and Open the Door are two other early game examples worth mentioning. So after I had initially finished my play session, I was of the opinion that the game was a little too light on story. However, upon further investigation, it seems the game isn't necessarily light on story, but rather on exposition, at least in the early going. The story concept is actually pretty interesting, and the game world is really quite unique as well. For those who are interested, Terranigma's story is not related to Soul Blazer or Illusion of Gaia in anything other than a tangential way. From what I understand, while there may exist a few similar elements or themes between the games, they don't actually share any kind of overarching narrative. Terranigma starts the player out in a village called Krista, which seems to be the only village to exist in the entire world construct the game begins in. After breaking through a door he was forbidden to open by the village elder, and freeing a friendly demon from a box under the house, Ark, who's this game's protagonist, discovers all the inhabitants of the village are frozen, except the village elder, which I found rather suspicious even if Ark didn't. In order to free the villagers, Ark is instructed to ascend 5 towers and overcome their trials to restore the people. That's more or less the extent of the storytelling in the early going, but it's through successfully overcoming the challenges of these 5 towers that the more interesting aspects of the story begin to reveal themselves. Basically, after each tower is completed, a continent of the real-world Earth is revived on the surface world, implying that the world Ark lives in is an underworld of some kind. This theme of creation and revival is apparently a prevailing element in the game, something the developers wished to implement as a contrast to the destruction of enemies that Quintet felt most other games focused on. I haven't really read much more about the story than that, considering I want to avoid major spoilers, but this idea, even in its early stages, is definitely interesting to me. And despite the game not having a script that's gripping or characters that feel thoughtfully fleshed out, I'm genuinely interested in the world itself and where the story's headed. The construction of the underworld is intriguing to me, seeing as it's not presented as a sphere, but as a torus. I'm not sure if this is explained at some point in the game, but the effect on the overworld map is really cool either way. Overall, I really enjoyed my first experience with Terranigma, and despite its simplicity and lack of exposition, I found myself fascinated by its world and absolutely hooked by its gameplay mechanics, which I must emphasize feel really good. I really like action RPGs as a whole, and this game definitely surpasses even some of my favorites of its contemporaries, like Seiken Densetsu 3, at least when it comes to responsiveness and overall control. For these reasons, I'm placing Terranigma on the number 18 slot on my list of review priorities. If you've played Terranigma, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it as well. I'm especially interested to know if the story gets more attention and focus later on, because if it does get deeper, that may persuade me to bump the game even a little higher on my list. So let me hear your opinions in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all again real soon.